My husband Marcus kissed my forehead this morning, handed me my daily smoothie, and told me he loved us. Us, meaning me and our unborn son. But right now, staring at the grayscale monitor in this cold exam room, I realized that smoothie was a death sentence. The doctor did not congratulate me. She did not print out a picture for the refrigerator. Instead, she walked over to the door, clicked the deadbolt lock, and looked at me with terror in her eyes. I never thought the person sleeping next to me was a monster until I saw the toxicology report. I am Nia, 32 years old, and I thought I had the perfect life. I own a successful architecture firm in Chicago and live in a penthouse I inherited from my grandmother. I thought I had a husband who doted on me. I was wrong, dead wrong. Before I tell you how I escaped the man trying to kill my child, please hit like and subscribe. You need to hear this because sometimes the devil wraps himself in designer suits and good intentions. It was supposed to be a routine 28-week checkup. Dr. Hammond moved the transducer over my belly, the cold gel making me shiver. I was waiting for the rhythmic whooshing sound of the heartbeat, the sound that usually made Dr. Hammond smile. But today her face went pale. She abruptly turned off the monitor screen facing me. The silence in the room was heavier than lead. Nia, listen to me very carefully. She whispered, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. Your cervix is dilated, 4 centimeters, but you are having no contractions. This is not natural labor. I tried to sit up, panic rising in my throat like bile. What do you mean not natural? Is the baby okay? She grabbed my shoulders, her grip tight and urgent. I ran your blood work from the sample you gave the nurse earlier because you looked so dehydrated. Nia, your misoprostol levels are through the roof. That is a drug used to induce labor or end a pregnancy. You are not sick, you are being dosed. The room spun. Misoprostol. The vitamins. The special green smoothies Marcus insisted on making every single morning because he said I looked pale. The way he watched me drink every drop before he would leave for work. The way he would get angry if I left even a sip. He is poisoning you, Dr. Hammond said, tears welling in her eyes. He is trying to force a stillbirth. If that baby is born dead, the trust fund does not activate. My hands flew to my stomach. My husband, the man who painted the nursery sunshine yellow last week, was systematically killing our son. I felt like I was going to throw up. He is in the waiting room. I choked out my voice, barely a whisper. He is waiting to take me to lunch. Dr. Hammond shook her head violently. You cannot go out there. If you go home with him tonight and take another dose, you will go into active labor. At this stage, with that amount of drugs in your system, neither you nor the baby might make it. You need to disappear. Now. She pulled a keycard from her lab coat pocket. There is a staff exit through the pathology lab down the hall. It leads to the alleyway. Go. Do not go to your car. He will see you. I grabbed my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs louder than the ultrasound machine. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip my jacket. As I slipped out the heavy steel back door into the blinding afternoon sun, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Marcus. Everything okay in there, babe? You are taking a long time. I have a cold drink waiting for you in the car. I stared at the screen, terrified. I was not just leaving a doctor's appointment. I was running for my life. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to get the key into the ignition, but I did not start the car. I just sat there, parked behind a rusted dumpster 3 blocks away from the clinic, trying to breathe. The leather seats of my luxury SUV, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a cage. I reached into my purse and pulled out the bottle of prenatal vitamins Marcus had packed for me this morning. They looked so innocent, just standard white capsules in a generic pharmacy bottle. But as I rolled one between my fingers, I noticed the seal was slightly loose. I twisted it open. The powder inside wasn't just white. There were tiny crushed flecks of blue mixed in. Misoprostol. The doctor's words echoed in my head like a funeral bell. He is poisoning you. My mind flashed back to the kitchen this morning. The sunlight was streaming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the granite countertops. Marcus was standing there, the picture of a devoted husband, humming a gospel tune as the blender whirred. He poured the green liquid into my favorite glass. "Drink up, babe," he had said, his smile dazzling. "It is for the baby's brain development." I remembered the way his eyes never left my throat. He watched me swallow every drop. He was not admiring me. He was monitoring the dosage. Then a chilling realization hit me. The ficus tree in the corner of the living room. Last week, the smoothie had tasted exceptionally bitter, metallic almost. When Marcus turned his back to answer a phone call, I had poured half of it into the potted plant. Yesterday, I noticed the leaves were brown and shriveled. I had scolded the housekeeper for overwatering it. But it wasn't water. I had killed that tree with the poison meant for my son. I was the tree. He was killing me from the inside out, smiling the entire time. I needed to be absolutely sure. I needed to see the mask slip before I walked back into that house. I unlocked my phone, my fingers feeling like lead. I opened our text thread and typed a lie. "Hey, honey. I am all done. The doctor said everything is perfect. My cervix is closed tight, and the baby's heartbeat is strong. Just a false alarm." I hit send and waited. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. A normal husband, a loving father would call immediately. He would be crying with relief. He would send a string of heart emojis. I watched the 3 little dots appear as he typed. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. He was hesitating. Finally, a gray bubble popped up. There was no celebration, no relief, no love. The message read, "Come home immediately. Jessica is here." My blood ran cold. He was not happy the baby was safe. He was disappointed. And now he was calling in backup. Jessica, his sister-in-law, the woman who always smiled at me with shark teeth, was waiting for me. They were regrouping. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was not going home to a celebration. I was driving straight into an ambush. I pulled my SUV into the private garage of the Millennium Tower, parking next to the slate gray Porsche 911 Turbo S. It gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, a $200,000 machine that I had paid for in full. I bought it for Marcus on his 35th birthday because he said it was necessary for his image as a high-end real estate broker. In reality, he had not closed a deal in 6 months. Everything he touched, drove, or wore was funded by my inheritance, yet he walked through the world with the arrogance of a self-made king. I took a deep breath, checked my makeup in the rearview mirror to ensure my terror was not showing, and stepped out. The private elevator ride to the 45th floor felt like an ascent to the gallows. When the doors slid open, revealing the foyer of my penthouse, the smell of expensive cologne hit me instantly. This apartment was my pride and joy. I had designed every inch of it, from the Italian marble floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. It was my sanctuary, paid for by the hard work of my grandmother. But as I stepped inside, the space felt violated. Marcus was pacing in the living room, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He was wearing the vintage gold Rolex Daytona I had gifted him for our anniversary, checking the time impatiently. When he saw me, he did not smile. He did not rush over to hug me or ask if our son was okay. Instead, his eyes went straight to my shoulder. "You are late," he said, his voice clipped and cold. He set his drink down on the glass coffee table without a coaster, a small act of disrespect that suddenly felt monumental. "Traffic was terrible," I said, keeping my tone even as I walked further into the room. "I told you everything is fine, just a false alarm." Marcus crossed the room in 3 long strides. He did not stop until he was invading my personal space. Before I could react, he reached out and snatched my Hermes Birkin bag right off my shoulder. The aggression was so sudden, so unlike the charming man I thought I married, that I stumbled back. "I need to see the discharge papers, Nia," he snapped, marching over to the console table. "Doctors do not just send you home after finding an issue without paperwork. I need to know what they saw." He upended my bag. My wallet, keys, lipstick, and sunglasses clattered loudly onto the polished wood surface. He rifled through my personal belongings like a frantic drug addict looking for a fix. He was shaking. He was desperate to find a medical report that confirmed his poison was working. He wanted to see the words cervical dilation or fetal distress in black and white. There are no papers, Marcus. I lied, watching him toss my credit cards aside. Dr. Hammond uploaded everything to the patient portal. She said I just need rest and hydration. He stopped digging and looked at me, his eyes narrowing with pure venom. You are lying. You always get a printout. You are hiding something. He looked like he was about to grab me to shake the truth out of me, when a sound from above stopped us both cold. It was the sharp, rhythmic clack of stiletto heels against the hardwood floor. Not from the guest wing, not from the hallway. The sound was coming directly from the master suite upstairs. My bedroom. My private sanctuary. I looked up toward the floating staircase just as the footsteps stopped at the landing. Marcus smirked, his aggression instantly replaced by a smug, terrifying confidence. He did not even try to hide the fact that another woman was walking out of his wife's bedroom. I realized then that Jessica was not just visiting, she was already measuring the drapes. Jessica descended the floating staircase as if she were the queen of the castle descending to greet her subjects. My breath caught in my throat not from admiration, but from sheer violation. She was wearing my emerald green silk robe. It was a limited edition piece I had bought for my honeymoon in Paris, a garment that represented intimacy and love. Seeing it wrapped around her body, the sash tied tightly around her waist, made me want to scream. She paused halfway down the stairs, running her hand along the banister I had paid to restore. "Oh, hey, Nia, I did not hear you come in," she chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I hope you do not mind. I spilled some coffee on my blouse and just needed something to slip into. It is so cozy. I can see why you spend so much time lounging in it." She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked right up to me, invading my personal space again. She looked me up and down with a critical eye, tilting her head like she was inspecting a damaged piece of merchandise. "You look absolutely terrible, hun. Gray, almost. Is that a hereditary thing, like weak genes or something?" "In my family, we breed strong women. We do not get all faint and fragile just because of a little pregnancy. Maybe that is why you are struggling so much to carry this baby. Your body just is not built for it." The insult was precise and practiced. She was not just calling me weak, she was attacking my lineage, my blackness, and my ability to be a mother all in one breath. I watched Marcus stand behind her, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He did not defend me. He looked amused. "I was just telling Marcus that I should mix up my special herbal tea for you." Jessica continued, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched away. "It works wonders for women with delicate constitutions. Let me go to the kitchen and whip it up. It will make all your problems go away." The double meaning in her words hit me like a physical blow. Make all my problems go away. She meant my baby. She meant me. "No," I said, my voice sharp. "I do not want your tea. I do not want anything from you. My stomach is upset. I need to use the restroom." I saw Jessica shoot a quick, sharp look at Marcus. It was a look of frustration, a silent communication between conspirators who had hit a roadblock. Marcus gave a barely perceptible shrug. "Suit yourself," Jessica said, her smile dropping for a fraction of a second before reappearing. "But you really should listen to family. We only want what is best for you." I pushed past her, my shoulder brushing against the silk of my own robe, and rushed toward the powder room tucked under the staircase. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, my hands trembling violently. Bile rose in my throat, fueled by fear and disgust. I dropped to my knees in front of the toilet, heaving, trying to expel the toxicity of their presence. As I gripped the porcelain bowl, trying to steady my breathing, a scent hit me. It was not the lavender potpourri I kept on the counter. It was heavy, musky, and undeniably masculine. It was Marcus's cologne, expensive, overpowering. And then I realized something else. As I leaned back against the toilet lid, the seat was warm, not room temperature, warm. My mind raced. Marcus had been standing in the living room when I walked in. Jessica had come from upstairs, but someone had been in this specific bathroom moments before I arrived. The warmth meant he had been sitting here, or they had been in here together. In my house. In my private space. The walls felt like they were closing in. I was not just living with a murderer. I was living with two people who had turned my home into their playground of betrayal. And I was trapped inside with them. The air in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. We sat around the mahogany table, the three of us, like a twisted parody of a happy family. Marcus sat at the head carving the roast chicken with a precision that made my stomach turn. Jessica sat across from me, sipping her red wine and watching me with eyes that gleamed with predatory amusement. I pushed the food around my plate, trying to look normal, trying to suppress the urge to scream. "You are barely eating, honey," Marcus said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "You need to keep your strength up, even if you know things do not work out." I looked up, gripping my fork. "What is that supposed to mean?" Jessica chimed in before he could answer. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "We are just being realistic, Nia. I have seen it 1,000 times in my nursing days. Sometimes the body rejects a pregnancy because the fetus is defective. It is nature's way of correcting a mistake. You need to prepare yourself emotionally for the possibility that there will be no baby at the end of this." The cruelty of her words took my breath away. She was not comforting me. She was planting the seed of inevitability. She wanted me to believe that when my son died, it was my body's fault, not her poison. I felt a sudden sharp clarity cut through my fear. I needed them to say it when they thought I was not listening. I needed proof that this was a conspiracy, not just bad luck. "I forgot the dessert in the kitchen," I said, standing up abruptly. "I need to get the tart before it burns." As I stood, I slipped my phone from my lap onto the chair, sliding it silently under the heavy linen napkin I had discarded. I tapped the record button on the screen just before the fabric covered it. I walked into the kitchen, my heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. I counted to 60, staring blindly at the stainless steel refrigerator, giving them enough time to speak freely. Then I grabbed a store-bought pie from the counter and walked back out. When I returned, the room was silent. Marcus was sipping his water. Jessica was checking her nails. I sat down, retrieved my phone with a sleight of hand, and slipped it into my pocket. "I am actually not feeling well," I said, feigning a wave of nausea. "I think I need to lie down. I will skip dessert." Marcus nodded, looking relieved to be done with the charade. "Go rest. Jessica and I will clean up." I walked calmly to the powder room, locked the door, and turned on the faucet to mask any sound. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. I plugged in my earbuds and pressed play on the recording. At first there was just the sound of silverware clinking. Then Marcus's voice cut through the static, low and urgent. "She looks too healthy, Jess. The doctor said she was fine. What if the pills are not working?" Then Jessica's voice, cold and clinical, sent a chill down my spine that froze me to the bone. "Stop panicking. She has a strong constitution, that is all. We just need to be more aggressive. Tonight, when you make her tea, crush 2 pills instead of 1. Increase the dose double. We are running out of time, Marcus. If she makes it past week 24, the state considers it a viable life. We need a miscarriage, not a birth certificate. The baby has to be gone by the weekend." I lay in bed, regulating my breathing to match the rhythm of deep sleep, counting every second that ticked by on the bedside clock. Beside me, Marcus breathed heavily, his arm thrown carelessly over his eyes. It was a performance of domestic peace, but under the duvet, my body was coiled like a spring. When the clock finally hit 2 in the morning, I made my move. I slid out from under the heavy down comforter, my bare feet making no sound on the plush carpet. I was not just a wife anymore. I was a spy in my own home. I crept down the hallway toward Marcus's study. The house, usually my sanctuary, now felt like a maze of traps. The study door was ajar. I slipped inside and closed it softly, not daring to click the latch. I moved straight to the abstract painting behind his desk. I knew the wall safe was there. I had paid for its installation years ago to store my grandmother's jewelry. Now it held the secrets of the man trying to destroy me. The keypad glowed faint blue in the darkness. I hesitated. I knew Marcus used to use our anniversary June 10th. I punched in 0610. The light flashed red. Error. My heart skipped a beat. Of course. Why would he use the date he married his victim? I thought about the text messages. I thought about the way he looked at Jessica. It was a sickening hunch, but I had to try it. I typed in Jessica's birthday, 0412. The mechanism whirred softly. The light turned green. The click of the lock opening sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer confirmation of his depravity. He had secured his secrets with her birth date. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside, past the stacks of cash and his passport, lay a crisp manila envelope. It was not labeled. I slid the documents out, straining to read in the moonlight filtering through the blinds. It was a draft. A petition for conservatorship. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on a paragraph that made my blood run cold. In the event of Nia Vance's permanent mental incapacitation or psychological instability, full control of the Jenkins Family Trust, valued at $5 million, shall immediately transfer to her spouse, Marcus Vance. The puzzle pieces slammed together, the gaslighting, the drugs, the public humiliation they were planning. They did not just want the baby gone, they wanted to drive me insane. If I had a breakdown after a miscarriage, Marcus could have me committed. He could sign the papers to lock me away, and then sign the checks to empty my accounts. He was not just stealing my life, he was stealing my sanity. I reached for my phone to snap a picture of the document, my hands shaking uncontrollably. But before I could unlock the screen, a sound froze the blood in my veins. The floorboard in the hallway creaked. It was the specific high-pitched groan of the wood right outside the study door. I shoved the papers back into the safe and pushed the door shut, but I did not have time to lock it. I dove under the heavy oak desk just as the handle of the study door turned. The door swung open slowly, casting a long, menacing shadow across the floor. I held my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth, watching Marcus's bare feet step into the room. Marcus froze when he saw movement from the shadows. I crawled out from under the heavy oak desk, keeping my eyelids heavy and unfocused, my movement sluggish and uncoordinated. I let out a low, confused moan, channeling every ounce of fear into a performance of drug-induced delirium. "Is it time for the smoothie, Marcus?" I asked, slurring my words intentionally. I reached out into the empty air as if trying to grab a phantom glass. I thought I heard the baby crying. He stared at me, his suspicion warring with his arrogance. For a terrifying second, I thought he saw through me, but then his shoulders relaxed. He believed the drugs were scrambling my brain. He believed he had already broken me. "Nia, what are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice sharp but less aggressive than before. He gripped my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. "I do not know," I whispered, allowing him to pull me up. "I am so tired, Marcus. The baby is crying in the walls." He scoffed, steering me back toward the bedroom like a naughty child. "There is no baby yet, Nia. You are sleepwalking again. Go back to sleep before you hurt yourself." I let him lead me away, my heart pounding against his hand. I had survived the night, but the psychological warfare continued well into the weekend. The First Baptist Church was supposed to be a place of refuge, but for me, it was a lion's den. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, illuminating the extravagant hats of the church mothers. I sat in the second pew wearing a modest navy dress, while Jessica sat next to me in bright yellow, looking like the sun itself. She held her head high, basking in the attention. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Vance, made her way down the aisle after the choir finished their opening hymn. She bypassed me completely, not even offering a glance, and went straight to Jessica. She placed both hands on Jessica's stomach, rubbing it possessively in front of the entire congregation. "Now this is what a healthy blessing looks like," Mrs. Vance announced loud enough for the deacons to hear. "Strong, vibrant, not like some delicate flowers that wilt under pressure. The Vance line needs strong hips and strong blood. You are doing the Lord's work, Jessica." The sting of her words was worse than a physical slap. The women around us nodded in agreement, casting pitying glances at my pale face. I was the wife, the breadwinner, the one who paid for the new church roof, yet I was the invisible woman. They saw Jessica as the vessel for the future, and me as a fading memory. I sat straight staring at the cross, forcing myself not to cry. After the service, while the congregation mingled on the front lawn, I stood alone near the hydrangeas adjusting my gloves. That was when Clara, an old friend from high school who worked as a city meter maid, sidled up to me. She looked nervous, glancing around to make sure Marcus was occupied with the pastor. "Nia, I do not want to start trouble," Clara whispered, gripping her Bible tight. "But you know I cover the district over on Elm Street. That is where Jessica lives," I said, my stomach tightening. "I know," Clara said, lowering her voice further. "I have seen Marcus's Porsche parked in her driveway every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month, in the middle of the day, when he is supposed to be showing houses downtown, and Nia, he does not park on the street. He pulls right into the garage." The confirmation hit me harder than the Holy Ghost. Tuesday and Thursday. The days I had therapy. The days he knew I would be gone for exactly 2 hours. He was not just cheating. He was building a second life on my time and my dime. I thanked Clara and walked back to the car. Marcus was waiting, smiling as he held the door open for Jessica. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Ready to go home, honey?" he asked. I smiled back, a smile that did not reach my eyes. I was more ready than he could ever imagine. I drove to the south side of the city, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds to make sure the slate-gray Porsche was not following me. I pulled up to a nondescript brick building that housed the law offices of Mr. Henderson, my grandmother's oldest friend and the executor of the Jenkins family estate. He was the only man in Chicago I trusted not to sell me out for a quick buck. Sitting in his leather armchair surrounded by towering stacks of legal precedents, I laid it all out. The misoprostol, the gaslighting, the draft of the conservatorship I had found in the safe. Mr. Henderson listened without blinking, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. When I finished, he took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a habit he only did when he was about to deliver devastating news. "Nia, the trust your grandmother set up was designed to protect the family bloodline," he began, his voice gravelly. "But it has a fatal flaw that I suspect Marcus has discovered." He pulled a thick binder from his desk. "Here is the breakdown. If your son is born alive, the $5 million principal locks down immediately. It enters a trust for the child that no one, not even you or Marcus, can touch until the boy turns 21. Marcus gets nothing. He becomes the father of a rich kid, but he stays poor." I nodded, gripping the armrests. "And if the baby dies, if the baby does not survive, the trust reverts to the next living heir. That is you. The money stays in your name. Marcus still gets nothing because you have a prenuptial agreement that separates your inheritance from marital assets. So why kill the baby?" I asked, my voice rising. "If he gets nothing either way, why kill his own son?" "Because of the third clause," Henderson said, pointing a finger at the document I had photographed in the safe. "The incapacity clause. If the heir, meaning you, is declared mentally incompetent or suffers a psychotic break, the court must appoint a conservator to manage the assets. Usually that is the spouse." The room spun. It was a two-step plan. Step 1 was to induce a traumatic stillbirth to break my heart. Step 2 was to use the grief combined with the drugs he was feeding me to stage a mental breakdown. He did not just want the baby gone. He needed me broken. He needed me drooling in a sanitarium so he could legally drain my accounts while playing the grieving, supportive husband to the public. I felt sick, but also strangely empowered. The confusion was gone. I knew the rules of the game now. Henderson opened his desk drawer and pulled out 2 items. The first was a small amber vial. The second was a tiny black object that looked like a button. "This vial contains activated charcoal and a binding agent," he explained. "If he forces you to drink that smoothie, and you cannot pour it out, take this immediately after. It will neutralize the misoprostol in your stomach before it absorbs into your bloodstream. It is not a permanent fix, but it will buy you time. He slid the black button across the desk. And this is a pinhole camera. Wear it on your blouse. Audio is not enough in a conservatorship hearing, Nia. Judges need to see the instability. We need to flip the script. You need to catch him in the act of drugging you or conspiring with Jessica. We need a smoking gun. I took the items, my hands steady for the first time in days. I pinned the camera to my lapel and pocketed the vial. I am not just going to catch him, Mr. Henderson, I said, standing up. I am going to destroy him. I walked out of that office not as a victim, but as a hunter. I had the antidote. I had the surveillance. Now I just needed to go back into the lion's den and wait for him to strike. But I did not know that Marcus had already accelerated his timeline. As I got back into my car, my phone pinged with a notification from our home security system. The cameras at the penthouse had just been manually disabled. Pack your bags, Nia, Marcus had said the moment I walked through the door. We are going to the lake house. You look exhausted and I cannot stand seeing you like this. It was not a suggestion. It was a command wrapped in the guise of concern. Now, watching the Chicago skyline disappear in the rearview mirror of his SUV, I felt less like a wife going on vacation and more like a prisoner being transferred to a maximum security facility. The lake house was a sprawling glass and timber structure that sat on 10 acres of dense woodland 2 hours north of the city. In the summer it was a paradise. In the gray dampness of November it looked like a tomb. As we turned off the main highway onto the gravel access road, I watched the signal bars on my phone drop one by one. By the time the house came into view, the words "no service" flashed across my screen. I gripped my purse tighter, feeling the hard plastic outline of the antidote vial against my hip. I was completely cut off from the world, just as he intended. We were not the only ones there. A bright red Jeep was already parked in the driveway. Jessica stepped out, wearing designer hiking boots that had clearly never touched mud. Behind her stumbled Derek, Marcus's younger brother. Derek was a sweet, bumbling man who worked in IT and thought he had won the lottery by marrying a woman as beautiful as Jessica. He had no idea he was just a useful idiot in her grand design. Surprise? Jessica squealed, waving a bottle of wine as if we were at a bachelorette party. We thought we would make it a double-date weekend, Marcus told us. You needed cheering up. Her cheerfulness was as artificial as the sweetener in the tea she tried to poison me with. I forced a smile, hugging Derek, who smelled like stale chips and innocence. He whispered that he was sorry for crashing our trip that Jessica had insisted. I squeezed his hand, realizing he was the only other person here who did not want me dead. You go lie down, babe, Marcus insisted as soon as we got inside, practically pushing me toward the master bedroom. Jessica and I will get dinner started. Derek can handle the luggage. I locked the bedroom door the moment I was inside, but I knew a lock was just a suggestion to a man who owned the master keys. I did not rest. I spent the next hour pacing, my mind racing. I needed an exit strategy. If the charcoal did not work, or if they tried something violent, I needed to be able to flee. I waited until I heard the distinct sound of laughter erupting from the kitchen, Jessica's shrill giggle mixing with the clinking of glasses. I slipped out through the patio doors and crept around the side of the house toward the detached garage where the cars were parked. The gravel crunched softly under my sneakers, sounding like thunder in the silence of the woods. My SUV was parked in the shadows behind Marcus's truck. I circled it, checking the tires. The front two were fine. The back left was fine. But when I knelt down to check the back right tire, my heart stopped cold. It was flat, completely decimated. And it was not a puncture from a nail. I ran my finger along the rubber and felt the clean, straight slice of a knife. Panic rose in my throat, hot and sour. I popped the trunk to check the spare tire well. It was empty. The spare was gone. The jack was gone. Marcus had not just brought me here to relax. He had brought me here to ensure I could not run when the bleeding started. I was trapped in the middle of nowhere with 3 people, and 2 of them were sharpening their knives. Lunchtime arrived with a deceptive sense of normalcy. Jessica stood at the kitchen island, ladling steaming mushroom soup into ceramic bowls. The smell of earth and cream filled the air, usually comforting, but today it made my stomach churn with suspicion. She hummed a cheerful tune, playing The Perfect Hostess, while Marcus poured wine for himself and Derek. I sat at the far end of the rustic wooden table, watching her every move like a hawk. "Here you go, Nia," Jessica said, placing a bowl directly in front of me. "I made yours special. I used almond milk instead of heavy cream since I know dairy has been upsetting your stomach lately." She smiled, that same shark-like grin that never reached her eyes. The other 3 bowls were served from the large tureen on the table, but mine had come from a smaller pot on the back burner. I looked down at the gray liquid. It swirled innocently, flecks of thyme floating on the surface. It looked delicious. It looked deadly. "Thank you, Jessica," I said, my voice steady. "That is very thoughtful of you." I picked up my spoon, feeling 3 pairs of eyes on me. Marcus was watching over the rim of his wine glass. Jessica was leaning against the counter, wiping her hands on a towel, waiting. Even Derek looked up from his phone, smiling encouragingly. "Eat up, Nia. Jess makes the best soup." I lifted the spoon to my lips, hesitating for a fraction of a second. Then I let my hand spasm. "Oops," I cried out as the bowl tipped over. The hot soup splashed across the table and onto the hardwood floor with a wet slap. The ceramic bowl shattered. Nia, Marcus barked, slamming his glass down. "Look what you did." "I am so sorry," I stammered, grabbing a napkin. My hand just cramped. "I don't know what happened." Before anyone could move to clean it up, Derek's golden retriever, Buster, darted out from under the table. The dog, always eager for a scrap, began frantically lapping up the spilled soup from the floor. "Buster, no!" Derek laughed, reaching down to grab the dog's collar. "You greedy boy, that is not for you." Jessica's face went white. Not pale, white. She lunged forward. "Get him away! Don't let him eat that!" Her reaction was too fast, too panicked for just a spilled lunch. But it was too late. Buster had licked the floor clean. For a moment, nothing happened. Derek was wiping the dog's mouth, chuckling. "See? He loves Auntie Jessica's cooking." Then the whimpering started. Buster stiffened. His legs locked up and he collapsed onto his side, thrashing violently against the table legs. A low, guttural sound tore from his throat. White foam tinged with pink began to bubble from his mouth. Buster, Derek screamed, dropping to his knees. "What is happening, Buster?" The room erupted into chaos. Derek was sobbing, trying to hold the convulsing dog. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the animal with a look of pure horror, not for the dog, but for the realization that his plan had just been exposed in the most gruesome way possible. I looked at Jessica. She wasn't looking at the dog. She was looking at me. And in her eyes, I didn't see regret. I saw murder. "He is having a seizure," Marcus yelled. "Get him outside." "No," I whispered, my voice cutting through the noise. "He is not having a seizure. He is poisoned." The dog let out one final agonizing yelp and went still. The silence that followed was heavier than the grave. Derek looked up from the lifeless body of his best friend, tears streaming down his face, confusion turning to shock. Then he looked at the shattered remains of my bowl. He looked at Jessica. "Why," he choked out, "what was in that soup, Jess?" Jessica took a step back, her hands trembling. It must have been a bad mushroom. I picked them from the garden. It was an accident." "An accident." I stood up, pushing my chair back. "You served me from a different pot, Jessica. That wasn't an accident. That was an execution, and you just missed your target." The silence that followed the dog's last breath was shattered by Jessica's scream. It was not a scream of grief, but of accusation. She pointed a manicured finger directly at my face, her eyes wide with feigned terror. "You did this!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You killed him! I saw you slip something into the bowl from your sleeve. You hated that dog. You are sick, Nia. You are absolutely sick." I stared at her, stunned by the sheer audacity of the lie. Derek looked up from Buster's lifeless body, his face streaked with tears and confusion. He looked from Jessica's hysterical face to mine, his grief making him malleable. "Jessica, that does not make sense," I started to say, keeping my voice calm, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "You served the soup. You brought it from the stove." Marcus cut me off before I could finish. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Stop lying, Nia!" he roared, stepping between me and Derek. "We all saw how unstable you have been, the mood swings, the paranoia. And now this! You tried to hurt Jessica and killed an innocent animal instead. You are having a psychotic break right in front of us." I tried to back away, but the kitchen island blocked my path. "Derek, listen to me," I pleaded, looking at the only person in the room who wasn't trying to kill me. "They are lying. Look at the pot on the stove. Test the soup in the pot." "Don't listen to her, Derek." Jessica sobbed, burying her face in Derek's shoulder to hide her dry eyes. "She is dangerous. She needs help." Marcus moved with terrifying speed. He did not call an ambulance. He did not call the police. Instead, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a pair of heavy-duty plastic zip ties. He had them ready. He had been carrying them the whole time. "For your own safety," Nia, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. He grabbed my wrists, twisting them behind my back with bruising force. I struggled, kicking at his shins, but he was stronger. He cinched the plastic tie tight enough to cut off my circulation. "Marcus, stop," Derek stammered, standing up. "Is that necessary?" "Maybe we should just call a doctor. She is a danger to herself and others," Marcus barked, dragging me toward the stairs. "If we call the police now, she goes to jail for animal cruelty. Do you want your sister-in-law in prison, or do you want us to get her the mental help she needs? I am handling this." He dragged me up the stairs, my heels scraping against the wood. He shoved me into the guest bedroom, the one with the heavy oak door and the deadbolt that locked from the outside. I stumbled, falling onto the rug, my hands bound uselessly behind me. "Stay there and think about what you have done," he sneered. The door slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt slide home with a final metallic click. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the window, but it was nailed shut. I was trapped. I sank to the floor, trying to regulate my breathing, trying to figure out how to cut the ties. But then a sound drifted up from the backyard. It was rhythmic, heavy, metal striking earth. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape. I peered through the blinds. Down below in the fading gray light, Marcus and Derek were taking turns with a shovel. They were digging a hole near the edge of the woods. It was large, much larger than necessary for a golden retriever. They were digging a grave, and I knew with chilling certainty that it was not just for the dog. The thunder that shook the house was a blessing. Each clap of thunder masked the sound of my metal nail file grinding against the painted hinges of the window. My fingers were raw and bleeding, the expensive manicure I had gotten just yesterday now ruined, but I did not care. I was fighting for my life. Finally, with a sharp ping, the bottom pin popped out. I used the leverage of the file to pry the top one loose. The window swung inward, not out, leaving the opening completely clear. I climbed onto the sill, the freezing rain instantly soaking my clothes. The wind whipped my hair across my face, blinding me, but I welcomed the cold. It made me feel alive. I reached for the old iron drain pipe that ran down the side of the house. It was rusted and slick with moss. I wrapped my legs around it and began to slide. The metal groaned under my weight, threatening to snap away from the wall at any second. I scraped my inner thighs and palms against the rough surface, but I did not stop until my feet hit the muddy ground. I was out, but I was not safe. A beam of light cut through the darkness, sweeping across the wet grass just feet from where I stood. I threw myself face down into the mud, crawling desperately toward the gravel driveway. Marcus stood on the back porch, a heavy flashlight in one hand and that shovel in the other. He was scanning the perimeter, checking his work, making sure his victim was still locked away. I shimmied on my stomach until I reached Derek's red Jeep. It was my only chance. My SUV was disabled, and Marcus had the keys to his truck. I rolled underneath the chassis of the Jeep, the cold undercarriage pressing against my back. From my vantage point, I watched Marcus's heavy work boots crunch across the gravel. He walked right past the Jeep, shining his light into the woods. He was looking for a place to hide a body, unaware that the body was watching him. I reached my hand up into the rear wheel well of the Jeep. Derek was a creature of habit, a simple man who was terrified of locking himself out. I prayed that his paranoia was stronger than his common sense. My fingers brushed against cold metal, then plastic. There it was, a magnetic hide-a-key box. I suppressed a sob of relief as I pried it loose. Marcus turned back toward the house. He must have heard the faint click. He paused, swinging the flashlight beam toward the cars. I held my breath, clutching the key so hard it cut into my palm. He hesitated for a second, then shook his head and walked back up the porch steps. The moment the screen door slammed shut, I scrambled out from under the Jeep. I unlocked the driver's side door, threw myself into the seat, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, the headlights cutting through the night like two eyes waking up. The front door of this house flew open. Marcus burst out, his face twisted in a mask of pure rage. He raised the shovel, sprinting toward the car. I slammed the gear shift into reverse. The tires spun in the mud for a heart-stopping second before finding traction on the gravel. The Jeep shot backward, fishtailing wildly. Marcus swung the shovel, the metal blade smashing into the front hood with a deafening clang, but he missed the windshield. I shifted into drive and floored the gas pedal. The Jeep surged forward, forcing Marcus to dive out of the way to avoid being crushed. I did not look back. I tore down the long, winding driveway, crashing through the wooden security gate at the entrance without slowing down. Wood splintered and flew into the night as I hit the main road. I was free, but as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the headlights of Marcus's truck flicker to life behind me. The hunt was on. The police station was only 5 miles away, but I turned the car around on the highway shoulder. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. But cold logic had finally overtaken my panic. What did I actually have? A dead dog that they would claim died of natural causes. A bowl of soup I had spilled myself. A husband who was a pillar of the community, and a sister-in-law with a nursing degree. If I walked into that precinct raving about poison and conspiracies without hard evidence, I would not be filing a report. I would be filing my own commitment papers. Marcus would win. He would become my legal guardian before the sun came up. To destroy a monster, you have to let him believe he has already swallowed you whole. I drove back to the city, rehearsing my lines until my throat was dry. When I walked into the penthouse the next morning, I looked exactly how they wanted me to look. Broken, hysterical, weak. Marcus and Jessica were sitting in the living room plotting their next move when I collapsed onto the floor in a heap of tears. "I am so sorry," I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. "I do not know what is happening to me. The hormones, the stress, I think I am losing my mind. I actually thought you were trying to hurt me. I am so sorry." The silence in the room was thick. I watched through the gaps in my fingers as Marcus exchanged a look with Jessica. It was a look of pure triumph. They did not see a wife in distress. They saw a problem that had solved itself. Marcus knelt beside me, his touch making my skin crawl, but I leaned into him. "Shh, it is okay, baby," he crooned, stroking my hair. "We know you are not yourself. We forgive you. You just need help." He went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water and 2 blue pills. "These will help you sleep," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Dr. Hammond called them in for you. Just take them, and let us take care of everything." I took the pills, I placed them on my tongue. I took a large gulp of water and swallowed hard, tilting my head back. Marcus watched my throat, satisfied. He did not see me slide the pills under my tongue. He did not see me spit them into my coffee mug the moment he turned to high-five Jessica. For the next 2 days, I played the role of the sedated, compliant wife. I shuffled around the house in my pajamas, staring blankly at walls, letting Jessica cook my meals, which I secretly flushed down the toilet. I let them believe I was fading away. On the 3rd night, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed looking at me with a gleam in his eye that I now recognized as greed. Nia, he said, patting my leg. People are talking. The scene at the church, the rush to the lake house. We need to show everyone that the Vance family is strong. We need to show them you are happy. I stared at him, keeping my expression vacant. What do you want to do? We are going to throw a party, he announced, smiling. A gender reveal party, the biggest one Chicago has ever seen. We will invite everyone. The partners, the clients, the church elders. It will be your redemption, Nia. A fresh start. I nodded slowly, forcing a weak smile. That sounds lovely, Marcus. Inside, I was screaming. He did not want a party. He wanted a stage. He wanted to parade his crazy wife in front of an audience to document my instability publicly, so that when he finally locked me away, everyone would say they saw it coming. He was building his case. But he didn't know that I was building mine too, and I was going to turn his stage into his scaffold. The moment the elevator doors closed, taking Marcus down to his office, I wiped the fake tears from my face and got to work. I had exactly 6 hours before he returned. I did not spend them resting. I spent them turning my penthouse into a surveillance state. I replaced the smoke detector in the living room with a high-definition spy camera. I tucked a tiny lens into the spine of a thick art book on the nightstand. I slid a listening device under the heavy marble kitchen island. If they wanted to plot my murder in my own home, they were going to do it in 4K resolution. While the adhesive was drying on a camera hidden in the foyer, my phone buzzed. It was the private investigator Mr. Henderson had recommended. He did not ask questions, he just asked for the target. I sent him Jessica's license plate number and her address. I transferred $5,000 to an untraceable account. I was burning through my savings, but money meant nothing if I was dead. By noon, the doorbell rang. It was not the investigator. It was Jessica. She swept in with a team of party planners holding a clipboard like a scepter. She did not ask for my opinion on the decor. She commanded it. "Move that sofa to the wall," she barked at a mover pointing at my vintage velvet couch. "We need space for the balloon arch. And get rid of those lilies. They smell like a funeral home." She turned to me, offering a pitying smile. "Go upstairs and rest, Nia. You look dreadful. Let me handle the heavy lifting. This party needs to be perfect for the family image. We cannot have you fainting and ruining the live stream." I watched her order the staff to strip my living room of its personality, replacing my elegant decor with gaudy gold and blue streamers. She was not just decorating for a party, she was erasing me. She was marking her territory, showing everyone that she was the true mistress of the Vance estate. I bit my tongue, playing the role of the fragile, grateful invalid. "Thank you, Jessica," I whispered, clutching my robe. "I do not know what I would do without you." "You would fail," she said simply, turning her back to me. "That is what you would do." I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking with rage. A bike messenger arrived at the service entrance 10 minutes later. He handed me a thick manila envelope sealed with red tape. It was from the investigator. Fast work. I tore it open, expecting to see photos of them at a motel or a restaurant. What I found was far worse. The photographs were grainy, taken with a long-range lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. Marcus and Jessica. They were walking out of a medical building. I squinted at the sign above the door in the background. New Beginnings Fertility Clinic. I flipped the photo over to check the timestamp. My heart stopped. The date was from 8 months ago, 2 months before I got pregnant. They were not just sleeping together, they were visiting a fertility specialist. A second photo showed Jessica holding a pamphlet, looking ecstatic, while Marcus kissed her cheek. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. They were not just waiting for my baby to die. They were actively trying to conceive their own replacement heir. They were building a new family on the ashes of mine before I had even finished burning. The penthouse was unrecognizable. What used to be my sanctuary of minimalist design was now a suffocating explosion of navy blue and gold balloons. A DJ was blasting music that rattled the expensive art on the walls, and a catering crew was circulating with trays of champagne I was not allowed to touch. Marcus had invited everyone. His business partners, the church deacons, even neighbors we had never spoken to. It was a full house for the premiere of his performance as the long-suffering husband. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window wearing a dress Marcus had picked out. It was loose beige and unflattering, chosen specifically to make me look frail and faded next to the vibrant decor. I forced a smile until my jaw ached, nodding as people whispered behind their hands. I knew what they were saying. Poor Marcus, stuck with a wife who is losing her mind. Mrs. Vance, my mother-in-law, held court in the center of the room. She had a microphone in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. She called for silence, the room hushing as she beamed at the crowd. "We are so blessed to be here today," she announced, her voice booming. "We are praying for a healthy grandson to carry on the Vance name, and we are especially praying for Nia. We all know she has been struggling with her nerves lately. It takes a village to support a woman who is fragile." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the word fragile hang in the air like a diagnosis. Then she turned her megawatt smile toward Jessica, who was standing by the dessert table, looking radiant, in a fitted royal blue gown that hugged her own pregnancy curves perfectly. "But thank God for Jessica," Mrs. Vance continued. "Look at her, doing all of this work while expecting her own blessing. Now that is what a strong, capable mother looks like. That is the kind of woman who holds a family together." The room erupted in applause. Jessica demurely lowered her eyelashes, soaking in the adoration that should have been mine. I stood frozen, my hands clenching the fabric of my dress. They were erasing me in real time, replacing me with the woman who was sleeping with my husband. I needed to get out of the room. The air was too thin. I turned toward the floating staircase, intending to retreat to the sanctuary of my bedroom for a moment of peace. I kept my hand on the railing, ascending slowly, feeling the weight of 100 eyes burning into my back. I was 3 steps from the top landing when I heard the click of heels behind me. I did not have to turn around to know who it was. Jessica had followed me, probably to deliver another one of her passive-aggressive insults away from the cameras. "You should really be more careful, Nia," she whispered, her voice right at my ear. Her breath smelled of expensive champagne. "You look so unsteady. It would be a tragedy if you had an accident in front of all these people." Before I could process her words, I felt a sharp, deliberate shove against my shoulder. It was not a stumble. It was a body check. She threw her weight into me, trying to knock me off balance on the slick, polished wood of the floating stairs. My foot slipped. Gravity took over, and for a terrifying heartbeat, I was falling backward into the void. My body reacted on instinct, a survival reflex sharpened by days of living in a war zone. As Jessica lunged, I did not freeze. I pivoted my weight to the left, gripping the banister with a strength I did not know I possessed. Jessica's hands, fully extended to shove me, grasped at empty air. Her momentum carried her forward, and gravity did the rest. She stumbled, her high heels scraping loudly against the polished wood. She did not tumble down the entire flight, but she fell hard onto the landing below, sliding down 3 steps before coming to a halt on her side. For a split second, there was silence. Then she let out a scream that was so piercing, so theatrical, it cut through the music and shattered every conversation in the room. My baby Jessica shrieked, clutching her stomach and curling into a ball. She pushed me. She tried to kill my baby. The room erupted. Guests gasped and rushed toward the stairs, but Marcus was faster than anyone. He bounded up the steps 2 at a time, bypassing Jessica entirely to reach me. Before I could even open my mouth to defend myself, his hand connected with my face. The slap was thunderous. It echoed through the high ceilings of the penthouse, silencing the crowd instantly. My head snapped to the side, my cheek burning with a heat that spread down my neck. I stumbled back against the wall, stunned not by the pain, but by the public execution of my dignity. "You are insane," Marcus roared. His face twisted in a mask of righteous fury that terrified me more than his coldness ever had. "I saw you. You looked right at her and you shoved her. Are you that jealous? You tried to kill my nephew because you cannot keep your own child alive." I looked out at the sea of faces below. My neighbors, my employees, my pastor. They were all staring up at me with expressions of horror and disgust. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked for my side of the story. In their eyes, the narrative was complete. I was the barren, bitter wife attacking the glowing pregnant mother. I didn't. I whispered, my voice trembling. She fell. She tried to push me. Liar, Mrs. Vance yelled from the bottom of the stairs, rushing to comfort a sobbing Jessica. We all know you have been off your medication, Nia, but this is evil. Marcus grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the bruise he had left days ago. He turned to the crowd, playing the role of the heartbroken protector to perfection. I am sorry everyone had to see this, he announced, his voice shaking with fake emotion. I tried to handle this privately. I tried to get her help, but I cannot risk the safety of my family anymore. He dragged me toward the bedroom, not to let me rest, but to imprison me. This ends tonight, Nia, he hissed in my ear low enough that only I could hear. I am not calling the police. I am taking you to St. Jude's psychiatric ward myself. I am signing the commitment papers immediately. By tomorrow morning, you will be in a padded room and I will be the power of attorney over everything. The door clicked shut, cutting off the murmur of the guests outside. The master bedroom, usually my sanctuary, felt like an interrogation cell. Marcus stood with his back to the door, loosening his tie. The concerned husband act had vanished the moment we crossed the threshold. In its place was the cold, calculating predator I had seen in the fertility clinic photos. He did not yell. He did not hit me again. He simply walked over to the safe, the same one I had broken into days ago, and pulled out a crisp document. He tossed it onto the bed next to me. The header read, "Durable Power of Attorney." It was not a request. It was an eviction notice for my own life. Sign it, Nia, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You have two choices tonight. You can sign this paper giving me full control over the trust and your medical decisions until you are stable. Or I can open that door, call the paramedics, and have you involuntarily committed to St. Jude's. With the show you just put on, and the testimony of everyone downstairs, they will lock you up for a 72-hour hold minimum. And once you are in the system, I will make sure you never get out. I looked at the paper. It gave him everything: my bank accounts, my properties, the right to make medical decisions for me and our unborn son. If I signed this, I was legally dead. If I did not, I was physically imprisoned. I looked up at him, letting tears stream down my face, letting my hands tremble violently. I needed him to see a broken woman. I needed him to see a victim who had given up. I cannot go to the hospital. I sobbed, reaching for the paper. Please, Marcus. I do not want to go away. I just want to rest. I reached into the pocket of my dress, my fingers brushing against the cold metal barrel of the pen I had ordered online 3 days ago. It looked exactly like the expensive Mont Blanc pen Marcus had given me for Christmas. I pulled it out, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. Marcus watched me with a smirk crossing his arms. Good girl, he said. You are finally making a rational decision. I pressed the tip of the pen to the signature line. The ink flowed out dark and blue, looking as permanent as any legal contract. I wrote my name, Nia Jenkins Vance, pressing down hard to show my submission. I handed the document to him, my head bowed in defeat. Marcus snatched the paper from my hand. He blew on the wet ink, checking the signature with a satisfied nod. He folded the document and tucked it securely into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket, right next to his heart. He thought he had just won the lottery. He thought he owned me. He did not know that the ink in that pen was chemically engineered to vanish completely within 60 minutes of contact with oxygen. By the time he tried to file that paper with the bank tomorrow morning, he would be holding nothing but a blank sheet of expensive stationery. The door to the master suite remained locked, but Marcus had left hours ago to entertain the last lingering guests downstairs. He walked out with a bounce in his step, the signed power of attorney document tucked safely in his pocket. He believed he had won. He believed that by morning the ink would still be black and my life would belong to him. He was celebrating my demise while I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the cold blue light of my smartphone. A notification banner slid across the top of my screen. It was not a text. It was a secure email from the private investigator. Subject line: paternity analysis. Rush order. My breath hitched in my throat. I had sent the samples 3 days ago. Strands of hair from Derek's hairbrush and a used tissue Jessica had discarded in my trash can. It was a long shot, a hunch born of paranoia. But as I tapped the file to open it, my intuition screamed that I was right. The PDF loaded slowly. I scrolled past the technical jargon to the bottom of the page where the summary was highlighted in red. Sample A, Derek Vance. Sample B, fetal DNA profile. Probability of paternity 0%. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Derek, the sweet bumbling brother who loved his wife more than anything, was living a lie. The baby he was so excited to meet, the child he was building a crib for, was not his. I scrolled down to the second page. This was the comparison against the sample I had pulled from Marcus's razor. Sample C, Marcus Vance. Sample B, fetal DNA profile. Probability of paternity 99.9%. The phone almost slipped from my numb fingers. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. It was not just an affair, it was a replacement. The plan was not simply to kill my baby for the money, it was far more sinister. They were orchestrating a complete substitution. The timeline became crystal clear in my mind. Step 1. Kill my son to prevent the trust fund from locking down. Step 2. Drive me insane so Marcus could take control of the principal millions. Step 3. Divorce me, or wait for me to die in an institution. Step 4. Marry Jessica and raise their biological child in my house with my money erasing my existence entirely. They were double-dipping. They wanted the heir and the fortune, and I was the only obstacle standing in their way. A cold, hard resolve settled over me, freezing the tears before they could fall. The fear evaporated. You cannot be afraid of a parasite. You can only exterminate it. Marcus had made a fatal error. He thought he was the only player on the board. He forgot about the pawn he had discarded, Derek. Derek was the only other person in this equation who was being played as a fool. He was the emotional leverage I needed. If I could break his heart with the truth, I could turn him into a weapon. I closed the email and opened my contacts. I scrolled down to Derek's name. I did not call him. Instead, I sent a single text message. Meet me in the garage in 10 minutes. Come alone. It is about Jessica. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was pale and bruised, but her eyes were burning. The weeping wife was gone. The architect was back, and I was about to demolish their entire foundation. I waited in the shadows of the expansive garage, leaning against the cold concrete wall. The air smelled of gasoline and old oil, a stark contrast to the sterile, perfumed lies upstairs. 10 minutes later, the service door creaked open. Derek stepped inside, looking nervous, clutching his phone like a shield. He wore a faded sweatshirt, looking far younger and more vulnerable than his 35 years. He was the only innocent person in this entire twisted family, and I was about to break his heart to save my own life. Nia. He whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. What is this about? Marcus is going to be furious if he finds us down here. Marcus does not matter right now, I said, stepping into the dim light. You do. And your family does. If this is about the party, Derek started, defensiveness creeping into his tone. Jessica feels terrible. She really thinks you need help. Derek, stop. I said, my voice soft but firm. I am not crazy. You know me. You have known me for 5 years. Look me in the eye and tell me you truly believe I would hurt a pregnant woman. He hesitated. The doubt was already there, swimming behind his brown eyes. He looked down at his sneakers. I do not know what to believe anymore, Nia. Everything is so messed up. I need to ask you something, I said, taking a step closer. And I need you to be honest with yourself, not with me. It is about Leo. Leo was their 2-year-old son, the apple of Derek's eye. What about him? Derek asked, stiffening. Have you ever wondered? I began choosing my words with surgical precision. Why Leo has those piercing ice blue eyes, the exact same shade as Marcus's, especially when you have brown eyes, and Jessica has brown eyes. Derek recoiled as if I had slapped him. That is genetics, Nia. Recessive genes. Jessica explained it. Her great-grandmother had blue eyes. Did she? I asked. Or is that just what she told you? Because in biology, 2 parents with brown eyes can have a blue-eyed baby, sure. But is it not a coincidence that the baby looks exactly like his uncle? The uncle who spends every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon at your house while you are at work. Stop it, Derek snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. He was shaking. You are trying to get into my head. I am trying to get you out of the fog. Derek, I pressed, my voice rising. Why did she ban you from the delivery room when Leo was born? Why does she handle all the medical bills privately? Why does Marcus pay for Leo's private school directly instead of giving the money to you? Derek leaned against my car, sliding down until he was crouching on the floor. He buried his hands in his hair. I asked her once, about the eyes. She said I was being paranoid. She threatened to leave me if I ever brought it up again. She threatened you because she is hiding the truth, I said, kneeling beside him. And she is doing it again with this new baby. But we can prove it, not with words, with data. I pulled out my phone and opened the login page for the cloud storage service everyone in the family used. The truth is in her backups, Derek. Her messages, her deleted photos. I know she syncs everything to the family cloud, but I need her password. I know you have it. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. He looked like a man watching his house burn down. If I give you this and you are wrong, he stammered. If I am wrong, I will sign myself into the asylum tomorrow, I promised. But if I am right, you are raising your brother's children. He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. Then with trembling fingers he took my phone. He typed in a string of characters. Blue Sky 0412. That is it, he whispered, handing the phone back. That is her password. Go upstairs, I said, standing up. Act normal. Do not say a word to Marcus. As Derek stumbled back toward the elevator, looking like a ghost, I looked down at the screen. The password was accepted. The loading circle spun for a second, then vanished. I was in. And the first folder I saw was labeled simply, Our Future M and J. I tapped the folder icon, my finger hovering over the glass like I was about to detonate a bomb. The file opened, unleashing a torrent of images and documents that made the bile rise in my throat. It was not just an affair, it was a systematic, documented takeover of my entire existence. There were hundreds of photos, Marcus and Jessica in Cabo San Lucas, when he told me he was at a real estate conference in Denver. Marcus holding Jessica's hand on the beach wearing the swim trunks I had bought him for his birthday. But the photos were just the prelude. The real horror lay in the subfolders labeled House Renovations and Financial Strategy. I opened the renovation file. It contained digital mock-ups of my penthouse. My office was relabeled as Jessica's sewing room. My grandmother's library was redesigned as a playroom for Junior. They had already picked out the paint swatches to cover the walls I had lovingly curated. They were not just planning to move in. They were planning to erase every trace that I had ever lived there. Then I found the text threads. I scrolled back to the date of my first ultrasound. Jessica wrote, "Is the doctor on board?" Marcus replied. "Hammond is a problem. She asks too many questions. We need to switch her to Dr. Evans at City General. He is easier to manipulate. Jessica, just make sure she drinks the smoothie. I added the powder to the kale this time. It masks the bitter taste better." I gagged. I physically gagged reading the clinical, cold-blooded way they discussed poisoning me. They talked about my dosage like they were adjusting the chemicals in a swimming pool. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the encrypted USB drive Mr. Henderson had given me. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely plug it into the adapter. I hit select all. I needed everything. Every dirty text, every stolen moment, every plan to spend my money. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%. 30%. Come on, I whispered, staring at the door. I expected Marcus to burst in at any moment. 50%. Suddenly, a sharp, searing pain ripped through my lower abdomen. It felt like a hot poker being twisted inside my womb. I gasped, dropping the phone on the bed. I clutched my stomach, doubling over as a wave of nausea crashed over me. I had avoided the tea. I had spilled the soup. But I remembered the water glass on my nightstand this morning. I had taken a sip to wash down my prenatal vitamin before I realized Marcus had poured it. Just one sip. But with the dosage they were using, apparently one sip was enough to trigger the cascade. 70%. The pain came again, harder this time, stealing my breath. My vision blurred at the edges. I fell to my knees, clawing at the bedspread. I could feel the contractions starting. They were unnatural, violent spasms that felt like my body was trying to turn itself inside out. 90%. I reached for the phone, my fingers numb. Download complete. I yanked the USB drive out and shoved it into my bra right against my skin. Nia Marcus's voice boomed from the hallway. "Who are you talking to?" I tried to answer to tell him to stay away, but my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the thick carpet, the room spinning wildly. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was the doorknob turning and the polished tip of Marcus's shoe stepping into the room. I was at his mercy, and my body was finally giving him exactly what he wanted. The world was a blur of red flashing lights and the deafening wail of sirens. I was strapped to a gurney, the ceiling of the ambulance rushing past me in dizzying streaks of white. Every bump in the road sent a fresh wave of agony through my uterus, a cramping so severe it felt like my body was being torn in half. Beside me, Marcus held my hand. To the paramedic adjusting my IV drip, he looked like a devastated husband, his face pale with worry, tears glistening in his eyes. To me, his grip felt like a shackle. "Please, you have to hurry," Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "She is in so much pain. She has been under so much stress lately. I think she might have taken something. She kept saying she just wanted it to be over." I tried to speak, to scream that he was lying, but my tongue felt heavy and swollen. The poison was doing its work, paralyzing my defenses while it assaulted my unborn child. I could feel the cold plastic of the USB drive pressing against my ribs inside my bra. It was the only weapon I had left, but it was useless if I died on this table. The ambulance screeched to a halt at the emergency bay of City General. The doors flew open and I was rushed into the chaotic brightness of the hospital. Doctors and nurses swarmed around us. "Where is Dr. Evans?" Marcus shouted, jogging alongside the gurney. I called ahead. "Dr. Evans is the only one she trusts." A tall, balding man with shifting eyes pushed through the crowd. This was Dr. Evans, the man from the text messages, the man they had chosen to finish the job. "I am here," Mr. Vance Evans said, taking control of the gurney. "We need to get her to Trauma Room 1 immediately." Marcus leaned in close to the doctor as they ran, lowering his voice to a frantic whisper that I was meant to hear. "She wants to terminate, doctor. She told me in the car. She said the baby is killing her. She is mentally unstable. Just do whatever you have to do to save my wife. Get that thing out of her." He was signing my son's death warrant and framing me for it in the same breath. If Evans performed the procedure, it would go down as an emergency abortion requested by a psychiatric patient. Marcus would win. "We are prepping for a D&C. Evans barked at the nurses. "The patient is hemorrhaging. We need to evacuate the uterus now." They pushed me through a set of double doors, the air turning sterile and cold. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking out, praying for a miracle. I felt the gurney slow down, then stop abruptly. "Step away from the patient, Dr. Evans." The voice was sharp, authoritative and familiar. I forced my eyes open. Standing in the middle of the hallway, blocking our path with her arms crossed, was Dr. Hammond. She was wearing her white coat, like armor, her eyes blazing with fury. Dr. Hammond Evans stammered, looking flushed. "This is an emergency, Mr. Vance requested my care specifically." "I do not care what Mr. Vance requested," Hammond said, stepping forward and placing her hand on the rail of my bed. "Nia Vance is my patient. I have been treating her for months. I have her medical history and I know exactly what a healthy pregnancy looks like." "She is hemorrhaging," Marcus yelled, stepping up to Hammond, trying to use his size to intimidate her. "She wants this procedure." "Did she tell you that?" Hammond asked, looking directly at Marcus with a gaze so cold it could freeze water. "Or did you decide that for her?" "Because I have a notarized letter from Nia in my file stating that under no circumstances is her pregnancy to be terminated without her explicit verbal consent given in a secure environment." Marcus froze. He hadn't accounted for my contingency plan. "I am taking over this case," Hammond declared, signaling to her own team of nurses. "We are going to ultrasound, not surgery. We are going to save this baby. And Mr. Vance, security will be waiting for you in the waiting room. You are not coming in." The sterile scent of the operating room was suffocating. I was strapped down, my arms splayed out like a crucifix, while the anesthesia team worked frantically to stabilize my dropping blood pressure. I was conscious, but the world felt underwater. Sounds were distorted. Time was elastic. I could feel the pressure of Dr. Hammond's hands on my abdomen, the terrifying sensation of being unzipped, but there was no pain, only a dull, hollow tugging that shook my entire core. "We need to get him out now." Hammond's voice cut through the haze, sharp and military grade. "The fetal heart rate is decelerating. He is reacting to the toxicity in her blood." Scalpel. Outside the heavy double doors of the operating theater, a different kind of violence was unfolding. I could hear the rhythmic, heavy thud of fists against the glass. Marcus was out there. He was screaming, his voice muffled but unmistakable. He was demanding to be let in. He was shouting about his rights, about his wife, but I knew the truth. He did not want to hold my hand. He wanted to ensure the job was finished. He wanted to see a stillbirth so he could start counting his millions. "Ignore him," Hammond ordered the team, her eyes never leaving the incision. "Focus on the field. Suction." I stared up at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes into my ears. "Please," I prayed silently. "Please let him be okay. Take me, but let him live." The tugging became violent. My body jerked on the table. "I have got the head," Hammond announced. "Shoulders are coming." The room held its breath. The beeping of the monitors seemed to speed up, matching the frantic rhythm of my own heart. And then a wet, slick sound. The pressure released instantly. I felt a sudden emptiness in my stomach that was both terrifying and relieving. Dr. Hammond lifted a tiny purple form into the harsh lights. He was small, so incredibly small. His skin was translucent, his limbs thin and fragile. He hung there limp for one agonizing second, 2 seconds, 3, then a sound. It started as a gurgle, then a cough, and finally a thin, reedy cry pierced the air. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. He was alive, he was fighting. But as soon as the cry rang out, Dr. Hammond's head snapped up. She looked at the nurses, then at the door where Marcus was still pounding. Her eyes widened with a sudden strategic realization. She raised a hand, cutting through the celebration. "Quiet," she hissed. The team froze. The nurse holding the baby quickly placed an oxygen mask over his face, muffling his whimpers. Dr. Hammond leaned over the drapes, staring into my eyes with an intensity that terrified me. "Nia, listen to me," she whispered urgently. "If he hears the baby crying, he knows he lost. He will double down. He will sue for custody. He will never stop hunting you." She looked at the door, then back to me. "We need him to think he won. We need him to think the baby is dead." The room fell into a deathly calculated silence, broken only by the muffled thumping on the door. Dr. Hammond nodded to the NICU team to whisk my son away through the back service exit. I lay there empty and bleeding, listening to the silence that would become my weapon. Dr. Hammond leaned over the surgical drape, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that demanded absolute focus. The room was silent save for the hum of the machines and the faint, distant sound of the transport incubator being wheeled toward the service exit. "Nia, listen to me closely," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "Your son is alive, but he is critical. He weighs 2 pounds. He is fighting, but he is defenseless. If Marcus finds out he survived, he will use his parental rights to intervene. He could demand a transfer to a cheaper facility. He could refuse life-saving treatment. He could finish what the poison started." I tried to sit up, but the anesthesia weighed me down like lead. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to see his face. But I saw the logic in her eyes. To save him, I had to let him go. "We have to let them believe he is dead," Hammond continued, gripping my hand. "It is the only way to get Marcus to back off. It is the only way to get the target off this baby's back. Nurse Miller is taking him to St. Mary's NICU through the service tunnels right now. He will be registered as a John Doe under my protective custody. Do you understand?" I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks, hot and fast. I was grieving a death that hadn't happened, breaking my own heart to shield his. I watched the back door swing shut, swallowing the only good thing I had ever created. I did not even get to kiss his forehead. Dr. Hammond straightened up. She took a deep breath, composing her features into a mask of professional defeat. She peeled off her bloody gloves and dropped them into the biohazard bin with a heavy thud. "Time to give the performance of a lifetime," she muttered. She walked out through the double doors and I listened through the monitors. I heard the heavy footsteps of Marcus pacing the linoleum floor stop abruptly. Mr. Vance, Dr. Hammond's voice drifted in, somber and grave. Marcus's voice was sharp, feigning panic. "Is she okay? Is Nia okay?" "Your wife is stable," Hammond replied. "The procedure was successful in stopping the hemorrhage. She is resting now." "And the baby?" Marcus asked. There was a pause, a silence that stretched on for an eternity. "I am so sorry," Hammond said, her voice catching perfectly. "The toxicity levels in the uterus were too high. His heart gave out before we could fully extract him. We did everything we could, but he is gone." I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. I imagined him calculating the trust fund math in his head. "The baby is dead. The money reverts to Nia. Now he just needed to prove I was crazy to take it all." "Oh God!" Marcus howled. It was a guttural, theatrical sound of anguish that probably echoed down the entire corridor. "No, my son, my poor boy." I heard the rustle of fabric as he likely collapsed into a chair or against the wall, staging his grief for the nurses and security cameras. "Can I see him?" Marcus sobbed. "Not yet," Hammond said firmly. "The body is being prepared, and Nia needs to recover from the anesthesia. Go home, Mr. Vance. Get some rest. You cannot help them tonight." There was more sobbing, more loud declarations of heartbreak, then silence. In the hallway, Marcus turned away from the doctor, his shoulders shaking. To the staff, it looked like he was weeping. But as he turned the corner toward the elevators out of sight of Dr. Hammond, his face smoothed out instantly. The grief vanished, replaced by a cold, satisfied smirk. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed a single word to Jessica. "Done." He hit send and stepped into the elevator, whistling a low tune. He thought the game was over. He thought he had won. He had no idea that while he was celebrating a death, I was already planning his funeral. The funeral was a masterclass in efficiency. Marcus had arranged it with the speed of a man trying to dispose of evidence rather than a father grieving a son. It was held on a gray Tuesday morning, with a closed casket that I knew was empty. I stood by the grave in a black veil, my body swaying slightly, not from grief, but from the exhaustion of maintaining the charade. I watched Marcus accept condolences from our friends, his head bowed, his hand squeezing shoulders, playing the part of the tragedy-stricken patriarch. But every time he hugged someone, I saw his eyes dart over their shoulder, checking his watch. He did not want to mourn. He wanted to get to the paperwork. We were back at the penthouse within an hour. The guests were gone. The flowers were left at the cemetery. It was just me, Marcus, and the silence of a house that felt like a tomb. He did not waste a minute. He led me into his study and poured me a glass of scotch, a drink I never touched. "Drink this, Nia," he said, guiding me to the leather chair. "It will help with the nerves. We have to handle some administrative things. I know it is hard, but the sooner we close this chapter, the sooner we can heal." He slid a stack of documents across the mahogany desk. They were not funeral arrangements. They were bank authorization forms, specifically the release forms for the Jenkins Family Trust. With the primary beneficiary deceased, the clause triggered a release of funds to the surviving guardian, me provided I was mentally competent. Or in this case, provided the husband held power of attorney. The bank needs your signature to confirm the death certificate. Marcus lied smoothly, pointing to the line at the bottom. "It releases the funds so we can pay for the hospital bills and the burial. It is just a formality." I looked at the paper. It was the key to the vault. $5 million. The price of my son's life. I reached into my purse, my hand trembling theatrically. I pulled out the same black pen I had used the night of the party, the disappearing ink pen. "I cannot believe he is gone," I whispered, letting a tear fall onto the paper. "I know, baby. I know. Just sign right there." I scribbled my name, pressing hard, making the signature large and looping. It looked chaotic, the handwriting of a broken woman. Marcus snatched the paper away the moment the ink hit the page. He stared at it, a hunger in his eyes that was terrifying to behold. He finally had it. He blew on the ink, folded the paper, and locked it in his desk drawer. "You did good, Nia," he said, patting my head like a dog. "Now go rest. Jessica is coming over to stay for a while. She is going to help you get back on your feet." I walked out of the study, leaving him to gloat over a signature that would vanish into thin air before the bank opened tomorrow. When I entered the living room, I stopped cold. Jessica was not just visiting. 3 large suitcases stood by the door. She was already in the center of the room, directing the housekeeper. "Take that painting down," Jessica ordered, pointing to the abstract canvas my grandmother had painted. "It is too depressing. We need something brighter in here. Maybe a mirror." She turned and saw me, a smile spreading across her face that was equal parts pity and possession. "Oh, hey, sis. I'm moving into the guest wing. Marcus and I agreed you shouldn't be alone right now." She walked over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of my design magazines, tossing them into the trash bin. "We are going to make some changes, Nia. Out with the old, in with the new. We are going to fix everything." I watched her dismantle my life item by item. She wasn't just moving in to care for me, she was nesting. She was clearing out the debris of my existence to make room for her new life as Mrs. Vance. I let my shoulders slump, feigning defeat, while inside my mind was sharpening like a blade. Let her get comfortable. It would only make the eviction more painful. I stood in the shadow of the hallway, watching the violation of my sanctuary. The door to the master walk-in closet was wide open. Inside, Jessica was moving with the ruthless efficiency of a demolition crew. My silk blouses, the custom-tailored blazers, the evening gowns I had worn to galas with Marcus, they were being yanked violently off their velvet hangers and stuffed into heavy-duty black trash bags. She wasn't packing them for storage. She was treating them like hazardous waste. Elena, our housekeeper, who had been with me since before the marriage, stood by the island, wringing her hands in her apron. Her eyes were wide with distress. "Miss Jessica," Elena stammered, stepping forward tentatively. "Mr. Marcus did not leave instructions to remove Mrs. Vance's belongings. Perhaps we should wait until..." Jessica spun around, dropping a pair of my designer heels into the trash bag with a clatter. She glared at Elena with a look of absolute disdain. "Mr. Marcus is too soft to do what needs to be done," Jessica snapped. She walked over to the rack and began hanging her own maternity clothes, bright, garish patterns that clashed with the room's serenity in the empty spaces she had created. "Listen to me, Elena. Nia is not coming back to this room. She is going away to a facility where she can get the help she desperately needs. She won't need silk and sequins in a padded room. She turned back to the mirror, holding up one of my cashmere sweaters against her own body, checking the fit. It was tight, but she smiled satisfied. From now on, you answer to me. I am the lady of this house now. If you want to keep your job, you will help me clear this clutter. I need space for the baby. I adjusted the lapel of my robe, ensuring the lens of the button camera was angled perfectly. I recorded every word, every threat, every act of theft. She was not just claiming my space, she was evicting my existence. I let the camera run for another 10 seconds, capturing her tossing my wedding album into the discard pile before I finally stepped into the room. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind me, looking momentarily startled by the mountain of trash bags. He looked from Jessica to me, bracing himself for a scream, for a fight, for the hysteria he had been cultivating. Instead, I offered him a sad, defeated smile. "It is okay, Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Jessica is right. Seeing those old clothes, it just reminds me of everything I failed to be. I don't need them anymore." Marcus relaxed, his shoulders dropping. He walked over and kissed my forehead. "I am glad you understand, Naya. We just want what is best for you." I looked at Jessica, who was watching us with a smug triumph. She thought she had broken me. She thought I was folding. I decided to give her the victory lap she was craving. "Actually," I said, turning to face them both, "being around all this death, it is suffocating. I need something to focus on, something full of life." I took a deep breath. "I want to throw a party. For Jessica." They both stared at me. Marcus blinked. "A party. A baby shower." I clarified. "A real celebration. I want to host it here this weekend. I want to celebrate the life coming into this family. It would help me heal Marcus. It would make me feel useful again. Please, let me do this one last thing before I go away." They laughed. That was the sound that echoed down the hallway after I made my offer. It wasn't a nervous chuckle or a polite dismissal. It was full-throated, incredulous laughter. From the shadows in the corridor, I watched them through the crack in the door. Jessica was leaning back on the sofa, clutching a glass of sparkling water, shaking her head in disbelief. "She is literally planning her own replacement's debut." Jessica giggled, wiping a tear from her eye. "God, Marcus, she is more broken than we thought. It is pathetic. She wants to throw me a party in the house she is about to get kicked out of." Marcus swirled his scotch, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Let her do it, Jess. Think about the optics. If Nia hosts the party, it cements the transition. It shows everyone that she accepts you, that she blesses this arrangement. By the time we commit her next week, no one will suspect foul play because she was so supportive publicly. It is the perfect cover." They toasted to their own genius, unaware that their arrogance was the very shovel they were using to dig their graves. They saw a submissive wife. They failed to see the general marshalling her troops. For the next 2 days, I went into a frenzy of preparation. But I was not just ordering flowers and hors d'oeuvres. I was curating a jury. I sat at the small writing desk in the guest room, hand-addressing envelopes with heavy cream-colored cardstock. The first batch went to the board of directors of Marcus's real estate firm. They needed to witness the moral bankruptcy of their CEO. The second batch went to the lifestyle editors of the Chicago Tribune and the Sun-Times. Jessica wanted fame. I was going to give her infamy. I promised them an exclusive look at the scandalous life of the city's elite. The final invitation was the most important. It was addressed to Chief of Police Thomas Miller. He had been my father's best friend, a man who had bounced me on his knee when I was a toddler. He was a man of the law, but more importantly, he was a man of honor. I slipped a small encrypted thumb drive inside his envelope, a copy of the evidence I had gathered, just in case something happened to me before the cake was cut. I dropped the stack of envelopes into the mailbox myself, feeling the heavy metal lid clang shut like the door of a prison cell. The trap was set. The players were invited. There was no turning back now. That night, as the house slept, my burner phone buzzed against my thigh. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from the darkness. It was a restricted number, but I knew who it was. I answered on the first ring. Nia. The voice on the other end was rough, ragged, as if he hadn't slept in days. It was Derek. Are you sure about this, Derek? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Once we start this, there is no stopping. It will destroy everything you thought you knew. There was a pause heavy with the weight of a shattered heart. I heard the click of a lighter and a sharp inhale. I went to the clinic today, Nia. I bribed the nurse to show me the records you told me about. You were right. You were right about everything. His voice hardened, shifting from grief to cold, calculated rage. I am done being the fool. Tell me what I need to do. I am ready to burn it all down. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a scene of grotesque opulence that made my stomach turn. It was not a baby shower. It was a coronation. The penthouse had been transformed into a winter wonderland of white roses and crystal chandeliers, a dazzling display of wealth that screamed new money. Champagne flowed like water, served by waiters in white gloves who moved silently through the crowd of Chicago's elite. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of gossip. Marcus and Jessica stood at the very center of the room, positioned under the main spotlight like a king and his new queen. Jessica wore a floor-length gown of ivory silk, a deliberate and cruel choice to mock my mourning, her hand resting possessively over her baby bump. She looked radiant, feeding off the attention, laughing with her head thrown back, as the city's most powerful socialites fawned over her. Marcus stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back, guiding her through the room with a pride he had never once shown me. They were drunk on their own victory, believing they had successfully rewritten reality. I stood in the periphery, a ghost haunting my own home. I wore a high-necked black velvet dress, severe and unadorned. To the guests, it looked like the attire of a grieving mother who had lost her mind. To me, it was executioner's robes. I watched the guests mingle. The real estate tycoons, the board members of the charity foundations, the lifestyle editors from the Tribune. They sipped vintage Dom Perignon paid for by my inheritance and whispered behind their manicured hands as they glanced my way. She looks unstable, they murmured. Poor Marcus. He is a saint for keeping her around. I scanned the room until I found the anchor in the storm. Chief Thomas Miller was standing near the bar nursing a club soda. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't mingling. He was watching Marcus with the cold, calculating stare of a man who had seen the autopsy photos of a golden retriever and the toxicology reports of a surviving infant. He caught my eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. The cavalry was ready. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the hour. 8 o'clock. The time for pretense was over. I set my glass of water down on a side table. The condensation left a ring on the wood, the only mark I intended to leave behind before I burned this false life to the ground. I straightened my spine and began to walk toward the raised platform where a microphone stand waited. The crowd parted instinctively, silenced by the sheer spectral force of my presence. The jazz band faltered and stopped playing. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Marcus turned, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he recovered. He thought I was coming to give a toast to his happiness. He thought I was finally capitulating, playing the good broken wife one last time before he signed me away. I stepped up to the microphone, the feedback whining slightly. I looked out at the sea of faces, locking eyes with Jessica, whose smile was tight and victorious. I took a deep breath, letting the cold rage steady my voice. Welcome, everyone. I said, my voice amplifying through the penthouse speakers, clear and unwavering. You all came here tonight to celebrate a new life, but I think it is time we talked about the death that paid for it. I held the microphone loosely, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. The guests shifted in their designer shoes, sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure. I smiled, but it was not the smile of a hostess. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. I have one final gift for the happy couple, I announced, my voice smooth and deadly. A retrospective. We often focus so much on the destination that we forget the hard work it took to get here. I wanted to share some behind-the-scenes moments of how this family was truly built. I raised a small remote control and pressed the play button. The massive LED screen behind me, usually reserved for displaying abstract digital art, flickered to life. The room went dark, the light from the screen bathing the guests in a harsh, cold glow. The first video was time-stamped 3 days ago. The angle was high, taken from the spy camera I had installed in the smoke detector. It showed the kitchen island in crystal clear, high definition. Jessica stood there looking over her shoulder to ensure she was alone. She pulled a small bag of blue powder from her bra. The audience watched in horrified fascination as she poured the contents into a bowl of mushroom soup, stirring it with a manic intensity. Then the camera captured her petting Derek's golden retriever seconds before she fed him the same poison she intended for me. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. I saw Jessica's hand fly to her mouth, her face draining of all color. Before the shock could settle, the video cut to a night vision clip. It was Marcus in the study. The audio captured by the microphone under the desk was studio quality. "We cannot wait for the miscarriage," Marcus's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, echoing off the marble walls. "The dosage is too slow. If the brat is born alive, the trust locks down. We need to induce labor this weekend and make sure the baby doesn't make it to the incubator. Once the kid is gone, I will have Nia committed by Monday." The video cut again. This time it was a split screen of text messages. The sexting, the plans to redesign the house, the mockery of Derek, the DNA test results showing Marcus as the father of Jessica's baby. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, a vacuum of shock. Then the sound of crystal shattering against the floor broke the spell. Mrs. Vance had dropped her wine glass. Red wine pooled around her feet like blood staining the white carpet. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, unable to reconcile the son she worshipped with the monster on the screen. "That is a lie," Jessica screamed, the sound shrill and desperate. "She faked it. It is AI. It is a deep fake." But no one was looking at Jessica. They were looking at Marcus. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of primal terror. He looked at the faces of his board members, his investors, his friends. He saw his life disintegrating frame by frame. The facade of the grieving, supportive husband had been stripped away, leaving only the naked greed underneath. "Turn it off!" Marcus roared, his veins bulging in his neck. He didn't run toward the exit. He ran toward me. He sprinted across the room, knocking over a waiter, his eyes fixed on the remote in my hand. He scrambled up the steps of the platform, his hands reaching out not to hold me, but to strangle the truth out of the air. "Nia!" he screamed, lunging for the cables connected to the screen. "You are dead." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just watched him come, knowing that he was running straight into the arms of his own destruction. Marcus scrambled up the steps, his hands clawing for the cables, his face twisted into a snarl of desperation. He was mere inches from the console when a figure emerged from the shadows of the stage wing like a battering ram. It was Derek. He did not throw a punch. He simply stepped forward and hooked his heavy work boot behind Marcus's ankle. Marcus, blinded by panic and momentum, didn't see it coming. His shin connected with Derek's leg and he went down hard. He face-planted onto the polished wood of the stage with a sickening thud that echoed through the microphone, the impact splitting his lip and sending blood spattering onto his white tuxedo shirt. He tried to scramble up, but Derek planted a foot squarely in the center of his back, pinning him to the floor like an insect. I didn't flinch. I simply pressed the button on the remote one last time. The screen behind us shifted. Gone were the text messages. In their place was footage from a hidden camera in a hotel room, the timestamp dating back to Derek and Jessica's first anniversary. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Marcus and Jessica tangled in sheets laughing. Not the laughter of siblings-in-law, but of lovers mocking the world. Then the video froze, shrinking to the corner as a document expanded to fill the massive LED wall. The paternity test. The names were highlighted in neon red. Father Marcus Vance. Probability 99.9%. A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the room. The elite of Chicago stared at the screen, then at the pregnant woman in the ivory gown. Jessica was backing away, knocking over a tower of champagne glasses, shaking her head as she backed into a corner. Derek looked down at his brother, tears streaming down his face, his expression a terrifying mix of heartbreak and homicidal rage. He grabbed Marcus by the collar of his ruined suit and hauled him up, only to slam him back down against the floorboards. "You slept with my wife." Derek screamed, his voice breaking into a raw, animalistic howl that silenced the entire penthouse. "I worshipped you, and you were in my bed. You killed my dog. You tried to kill Nia." Derek looked at Jessica, his eyes wild. "And that baby. That is not my son. You let me build a crib for my brother's bastard. You stole my life." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. It was too much truth for one room to hold. Near the dessert table, the matriarch of the Vance dynasty, the woman who had orchestrated the family image with an iron fist, finally crumbled. Mrs. Vance clutched her chest, her heavily bejeweled hand clawing at the pearls around her neck as if they were strangling her. Her face turned a terrifying shade of gray. She gasped, her eyes rolling back in her head, and she collapsed onto the white carpet. Mom Marcus yelled, spitting blood, trying to scramble away from Derek's grip. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Guests were screaming, waiters were dropping trays, and the sound of shattering glass mixed with the frantic calls for a doctor. But I didn't move to help. I stood center stage, the architect of the apocalypse, watching the Vance dynasty burn to the ground. The paramedics were already rushing into the penthouse, swarming around the fallen form of Mrs. Vance. But Marcus used the distraction to scramble to his feet. He was bleeding. His tuxedo was torn and his reputation was in ashes, but he was still fighting for the only thing he truly loved: the money. He shoved a waiter aside, staggering toward the center of the room, his eyes wild and desperate. He pointed a shaking finger at me, screaming over the commotion. "It is all a lie," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "Do not listen to her. She is mentally ill. She is hallucinating. That video is fake. It is deep fake technology." He looked around at the stunned faces of his investors, begging them to believe him. "There is no baby. My son died in that operating room. I saw the death certificate. I signed the release forms. The trust fund reverts to the legal guardian. That money is mine. You hear me? The baby is dead." I looked at him with a pity that was colder than hate. "You really should have checked the body, Marcus," I said into the microphone. "Or at least you should have waited until the ink was dry." I nodded toward the main entrance. "Open the doors." The heavy mahogany doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open with a dramatic groan. The room fell silent again. The only sound, the rhythmic beep of the portable heart monitor the EMTs were attaching to Mrs. Vance. Dr. Hammond stood in the doorway. She was not wearing scrubs. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit, looking every inch the formidable professional she was, and in her arms, wrapped in a simple blue blanket, was a baby. She walked through the crowd, the guests parting for her like the Red Sea. She did not look at the cameras. She did not look at the police officers who were now stepping forward. She looked straight at Marcus. Marcus stopped breathing. His mouth hung open, his face draining of the flushed red anger, turning a sickly, ghostly white. He shook his head slowly, a silent prayer that he was hallucinating. Dr. Hammond stepped up to the edge of the platform. She shifted the bundle in her arms, revealing a tiny pink face. The baby squirmed, letting out a soft, healthy cry that echoed through the silent room like a gavel strike. "Say hello to your father, Marcus," Dr. Hammond said, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "He is a fighter. He is a lot harder to kill than you thought." Marcus took a step back, his knees buckling. He looked from the baby to me and then to the police chief, who was now unhooking handcuffs from his belt. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The air was alive, the trust was locked, the power of attorney was void, and the attempted murder charge was no longer a theory, it was a failed execution with a living witness. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He just stood there staring at the sun he tried to destroy as the walls of his life finally completely collapsed in on him. Chief Thomas Miller did not need a microphone to command the room. He stepped out from the stunned crowd, his heavy footsteps on the marble floor sounding like a drumbeat of doom. Two uniformed officers materialized from the service entrance, their hands resting on their holsters flanking him like silent sentinels. The party was officially over. Marcus Vance, Jessica Jenkins Miller, announced, his voice projecting with the practiced authority of a man who had spent 30 years putting criminals behind bars. "You are under arrest." Marcus tried to step back, but he bumped into the edge of the platform. Under arrest, he stammered, sweat pouring down his face, mixing with the blood from his split lip. "For what?" "This is a misunderstanding. This is a domestic dispute." Miller pulled a folded warrant from his jacket pocket and snapped it open. "I have a warrant here for your immediate detainment on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and aggravated animal cruelty." He looked at Jessica, who was trembling so violently, her ivory silk dress rippled like water. "And for you, Ms. Jenkins, we have additional charges of administering a controlled substance with intent to cause harm and identity theft." The uniformed officers moved in. One grabbed Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back with practiced efficiency. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent penthouse, a sound more final than a gunshot. Jessica let out a shriek that tore through the air. "No. You cannot arrest me. I am pregnant. I am a high-risk pregnancy." She scrambled away from the officer, reaching for her backing into the dessert table. A tower of macarons went flying. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, looking for a scapegoat. Her gaze landed on Marcus. It was him, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the man she had been kissing an hour ago. "He made me do it. I was scared of him. He threatened me. He said he would kill me if I did not help him get the money." Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes bulging with disbelief and rage. "You lying witch!" Marcus roared, struggling against the cuffs. "You came to me. You brought the poison. You are the one who hated the dog." He turned to the chief, spitting words in his desperation. "Check her search history." She looked up the dosage. "She is the psychopath. I just wanted the divorce. She wanted the money." They were eating each other alive. The united front, the passionate lovers, the partners in crime. It all disintegrated the moment the consequences arrived. They were like rats in a bucket, clawing over each other to escape the rising water. "Get them out of here," Miller ordered, signaling his men. As the officers dragged them toward the elevator, Jessica kicked and screamed, her heels scraping grooves into the expensive flooring. Marcus hung his head, defeated, muttering curses under his breath. The guests parted, watching with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination, as the royalty of Chicago were hauled away like common street thugs. I stood on the raised platform alone in the spotlight. The chaos swirled below me, but I felt a profound stillness. A waiter, trembling slightly, passed by with a tray of drinks. I reached out and took a glass of red wine. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at the empty doorway where my tormentors had just vanished. I raised the glass to my lips. My hand was steady, perfectly still, not a single drop spilled. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The vintage was excellent. It tasted like justice. The flashing lights of the police cruisers were replaced by the rhythmic strobe of the ambulance waiting at the curb. The paramedics hoisted the stretcher, securing the straps across Mrs. Vance's chest. She looked small. The imperious matriarch, who had ruled her family with terror and checkbooks, was reduced to a frail, trembling woman in a stained evening gown. Her face was ashen, the oxygen mask fogging with her shallow breaths. As they wheeled her toward the elevator, her eyes frantically searched the room until they landed on me. She clawed at the paramedic's sleeve, making a weak, garbled noise until he lowered the mask for a moment. "Nia," She croaked, her voice thin and desperate. Nia, please, do not let them take me to City General. Call Dr. Sterling. Call the lawyer. You have to fix this. We are family. I walked toward the stretcher. The heels of my shoes clicked on the marble, a steady rhythmic sound that cut through the murmurs of the remaining staff. I stopped inches from her face. I looked down at the woman who had watched her son emotionally abuse me for years and called it strong leadership. The woman who had stood on this very floor an hour ago and publicly diagnosed me as insane to clear the path for her new favorite daughter-in-law. There is no we anymore, Evelyn, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. The accounts are frozen. The lawyers are currently representing the victims, not the perpetrators. And Dr. Sterling does not make house calls for accessories to attempted murder. Her eyes widened in genuine horror. Tears pooled in the wrinkles around her eyes. But I have nowhere to go, she sobbed. Marcus handles everything. Marcus is going to prison, I replied, smoothing a wrinkle on my dress. And since the trust fund is now locked down for my son, the payments for your private suite at the assisted living facility will bounce tomorrow morning. I leaned in closer, ensuring she heard every syllable. You chose your side, Mrs. Vance. You bet on the son who wanted to kill my child. You lost. Good luck at the state nursing home. I hear the waiting list for a semi-private room is only 6 months long. I signaled to the paramedics. Take her. No, Nia! No, she wailed as they rolled her into the elevator. I turned my back on her before the doors even closed. I did not watch her go. I walked back toward the balcony, the night air cooling the sweat on my skin. Some might call it cruel to abandon a sick old woman. But as I looked at the city lights below, I felt nothing but a profound sense of balance. She had spent a lifetime teaching Marcus that people were disposable assets. It was only fitting she finally learned what it felt like to be liquidated. The morning sun hit the penthouse floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the wreckage of the previous night. The white carpet was stained with wine and crushed macarons, looking like a battlefield. But the air was different. It was lighter. For the first time in months, I did not wake up afraid that my breakfast would kill me. I woke up the sole owner of my life. Mr. Henderson arrived at 9 sharp. He did not look like a man who had just witnessed a society scandal. He looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. He set his briefcase on the dining table right where Marcus used to sit and critique my cooking. The papers are filed, Nia Henderson said, sliding a thick stack of documents toward me. We triggered the infidelity clause immediately. Thanks to your video evidence, there is no need for arbitration. It is black and white. I picked up the document. It was a masterpiece of legal retribution. My father had insisted on a draconian prenuptial agreement, one that Marcus had signed arrogantly, believing he would never be caught. It stated clearly that in the event of proven adultery, the offending party forfeited all claims to marital assets, including any shares in the family business. He is out, Henderson confirmed with a grim smile. The board voted at 7 this morning. They removed him as CEO, effective immediately. He leaves this marriage with exactly what he brought into it: his student loan debt and his ego. I signed the papers with a steady hand. There was no hesitation, no mourning for the man I thought I loved. That man had never existed. Once Henderson left, the real cleaning began. I called a locksmith to change every entry code and physical lock in the penthouse. Then I went to the master bedroom. I did not pack Marcus's things. I did not donate them to charity. I dragged his bespoke Italian suits, his silk ties, and his cashmere sweaters out onto the terrace. I piled them into the copper fire pit. I doused the mountain of expensive fabric in lighter fluid, the chemical smell mixing with the fresh morning air. I struck a match and watched the flames roar to life. The heat was intense, curling the leather of his loafers and turning his silk shirts to ash. I watched the smoke rise, carrying away the last lingering scent of his cologne. I went back inside to clear out his nightstand. In the back of the bottom drawer, tucked inside an old cigar box, I found a folded piece of stationery. It wasn't a business document. It was a handwritten note. I unfolded it. The date was from 3 years ago. Before I was pregnant. Before the dog died. It was addressed to Jessica. Just be patient. Baby Marcus's familiar handwriting scrawled across the page. The trust has strict rules, but I am working on a workaround. As soon as I get the money secured, I am going to Tongko that architect bitch out of here. This house, this life, it is all going to be ours. I stared at the words. Architect bitch. That was all I was to him. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a partner. I was just a squatter in the house he felt entitled to. He had been planning my disposal since the day we said I do. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply walked back out to the terrace and tossed the letter into the heart of the fire. I watched the paper blacken and crumble, the words disappearing into the flames. He wanted me out of the house. Now the only thing leaving was his ash. The wooden benches of the courtroom were hard and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the plush velvet chairs where this nightmare had begun. I sat in the front row, my hands folded calmly in my lap, watching the final act of the tragedy play out. 6 months of depositions, forensic analysis, and jury selection had led to this moment. The air in the room was stale recycled, and heavy with the scent of impending judgment. Marcus stood at the defense table. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame, stripping him of the tailored silhouette he had used as armor for so long. He had lost weight. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and gray. When the judge asked him to rise, he did not stand with the arrogance of a CEO. He stood with the slouch of a defeated man. The gavel did not bang. It simply rested as Judge Keller read the verdict with a monotone finality that chilled the bone. For the charges of conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud and aggravated assault, Marcus Vance was sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. There was no possibility of parole for the first 20. Marcus closed his eyes. He did not look at me. He did not look at his mother, who was sobbing quietly in the back row, a shadow of her former self. He simply gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Jessica was next. She was tried separately, but sentenced on the same day, 15 years. The judge was less lenient with her plea of coercion, citing the video evidence of her poisoning the soup with her own hands. But the true sentence came afterward. The judge declared her unfit, permanently stripping her of all parental rights to the infant boy she had birthed in prison custody. She screamed then. It was a raw, animalistic sound of a woman realizing she had gambled her own flesh and blood for a payout that would never come. I waited in the marble corridor while the bailiffs led them away in chains. The hallway was empty, except for one man sitting on a bench rocking a stroller back and forth. Derek. He looked up as I approached. He looked older, the lines around his eyes etched deep by betrayal, but his jaw was set with a new kind of strength. He was raising his brother's son. He was raising the child of the wife who had deceived him. It was a burden no man should have to carry, but he was doing it. I stopped a few feet away. I did not look into the stroller. I could not bring myself to see Marcus's eyes staring back at me from an innocent face. I deposited the check this morning, Derek, I said softly. It is a trust fund. It covers education, medical, housing. You won't have to worry about money. Derek nodded, his throat working as he tried to find the words. You did not have to do that, Nia. After everything they did to you, that is Marcus's son. No, I corrected him gently. That is your son now. Raise him to be a better man than his father. Break the cycle, Derek. I turned to leave, placing a hand on his shoulder for a brief second. It was a goodbye. I would not be visiting. I would not be the aunt who came for birthdays. I was the benefactor, the distant guardian angel who ensured they survived, but I could not be part of the wreckage any longer. I walked toward the massive double doors at the end of the hall. I pushed them open with both hands, feeling the heavy wood give way. The rush of warm air hit me first, followed by the blinding brilliance of the midday sun. The noise of the city, the traffic, the life continuing on the streets of Chicago washed over me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that tasted sweet and clean. The nightmare was locked behind me in a cage of concrete and steel. I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, adjusted my sunglasses, and walked down into the light. I was alone, and for the first time in my life, I was completely free. The penthouse no longer smelled of secrets and stale scotch. I had stripped the walls down to the studs in the living room, removing the dark mahogany paneling Marcus had loved so much. The space was now an expanse of warm cream and soft grays flooded with the natural light he had always insisted on blocking out. It was no longer a stage for a tragedy, it was a home. I sat at my drafting table, the angle-poised lamp casting a focused glow on the blueprints spread out before me. My hand moved across the paper with a fluidity I hadn't felt in years. For so long, my creativity had been stifled, critiqued, and diminished. Now the lines were bold, the structures were sound. I was designing a community center, a place for safety and gathering, not a monument to ego. A soft gurgle broke my concentration. I looked down at the plush rug beside my desk. Liam was awake. My son, the miracle that was supposed to be a casualty, was kicking his legs in the air, reaching for a dangling wooden toy. He was 6 months old now, his cheeks round and pink, his eyes bright with curiosity. There was no trace of the trauma of his birth, no shadow of the poison that had almost stolen him from me. I reached down and let him wrap his tiny hand around my finger. His grip was strong. It was terrifying to think how close I had come to losing this. I had been raised to believe that family was the ultimate sanctuary, that blood was a binding contract of safety. I learned the hard way that blood is nothing more than biology. True family isn't about whose DNA you share. It is about who stands in front of the bullet for you. Marcus and his mother shared blood, and they shared a cell block in my nightmares. Dr. Hammond and I shared nothing but a professional code, and she had saved my life. Trust, I realized, was not something to be given blindly like a dowry. It was something to be earned day by day, action by action. My intuition had screamed at me for months, and I had silenced it to be a good wife. I would never silence that voice again. It was the only compass I needed. The silence was interrupted by the buzz of my phone on the desk. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't the press. It was a local number. I picked it up expecting a contractor. "Hello, this is Nia," I said. "Hi, Nia. My name is Julian Thorne," a deep, calm voice answered. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I saw your portfolio on the new city registry. The work you did on the waterfront project is extraordinary." I paused. He didn't sound demanding. He sounded genuinely appreciative. There was a kindness in his tone that I wasn't used to, a gentle respect that felt foreign yet welcome. "I am looking for an architect to help me restore an old library in the historic district," he continued. "I don't want to tear it down. I want to save its soul. I have a feeling you are the only one who knows how to rebuild something broken without losing its history." I looked at my son, then out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold. The darkness was gone. "I think I can help you with that, Julian," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in a long time. "When would you like to meet?" It was not an ending. It was a blueprint for a beginning. I placed the phone back on the cradle. The meeting was set. The future was waiting. But before I stepped forward into that new life, there was one person left I needed to speak to. You. I turned in my chair, looking past the drafting table, past the sunlit room, and directly into the lens of the camera. The barrier between my world and yours dissolved. You watched me almost lose everything. You saw the red flags before I did. The spilled soup, the hushed phone calls in the hallway, the dog digging a grave in the backyard. It is easy to spot the monster when the lights are turned on. But when you are living in the dark, manipulation just feels like love. They call it gaslighting because it burns up your reality until you are left standing in the ashes, wondering if you were the one holding the match. Marcus made me believe I was broken so he could sell me for parts. He made me question my sanity, so I would not question his morality. It is a slow, methodical erasure of the self. It starts with a question mark. It starts with, "You are crazy," or "You are imagining things," or "Why are you so sensitive?" It is a slow drip of poison that paralyzes your defenses long before it stops your heart. I learned the hard way that paranoia is often just a survival instinct that has not been proven right yet. We are taught to be polite. We are taught to stand by our partners. We are taught to keep the peace, but peace at the cost of your life is not peace, it is surrender. If you are watching this and something feels heavy in your gut, listen to it. If your friends tell you that he is changing, listen to them. If your doctor fights for you when your partner will not listen to them. And if that quiet, terrified voice in the back of your head tells you to run, do not pack a bag, do not make an excuse, do not wait for the perfect moment. Just run. Run barefoot if you have to. Run before the ink dries on the power of attorney. Do not wait until you are staring at a vial of blue powder to realize you have been sleeping next to the enemy. My story ended with justice, but too many stories end in silence. If my journey resonated with you, or if you think it might wake someone else up before it is too late, please share this. Hit that subscribe button, not for fame, but to keep this signal strong. The more we talk about the shadows, the fewer places the monsters have to hide. Let us build a community that watches out for each other. I turned back to the rug where Liam was playing. He let out a joyous, bubbling laugh, reaching his chubby hands toward the sunlight dancing on the floorboards. I picked him up, lifting him high into the air. He looked down at me with pure, unadulterated trust. I pulled him close, burying my face in his neck, breathing in the scent of a future that almost wasn't ours. I looked back at the camera one last time, no longer the victim, no longer the weeping wife. A smile of genuine, unbreakable peace broke across my face. We made it. The most vital lesson from Nia's journey is that intuition is not paranoia, it is your soul's survival mechanism. We often silence our inner alarm bells to be polite or to preserve a relationship, but true love never requires you to doubt your own sanity. Gaslighting thrives in silence and self-doubt. When your reality is constantly denied by those closest to you, do not look away. Trust the evidence of your eyes and the feeling in your gut. Your safety is worth infinitely more than any marriage certificate or social image. If this story opened your eyes, please subscribe and share it to help others recognize the signs before it's too late.